Every powerful society believes it is the exception. Every superpower believes that the rules that ended Rome, Spain, and Weimar Germany somehow stop at its borders. The flags change. The technology advances, the slogans update, the underlying math never does. Right now, the numbers inside the American financial system are telling a story that feels familiar to anyone who studies the end of empires. The debt curve, the money creation, the silent decisions of central banks, and the behavior of gold all line up in a pattern that has already broken civilizations that thought they were untouchable. On the surface, the malls are open, the markets trade, the news cycle moves on. Underneath, the structure creaks. Gold trading above $4,000 per ounce is not just a price on a chart. It is a message. It is the same message history has delivered before every major monetary reset. It is the market's way of saying that confidence in paper promises is evaporating, and that the system built on those promises is running out of runway. The United States still looks stable from a distance. The hidden signals say otherwise. Every empire discovers the same problem. Power is expensive. Military bases across continents, surveillance networks, aircraft carriers, social programs, domestic security structures, financial backstops for allies. Each piece feels necessary. The combined bill grows faster than the real economy that has to pay for it. In the American system, the cost of maintaining global reach now eats a larger and larger share of national output. Interest payments on past decisions add a second invisible army, one that must be fed before anyone else. This is not framed as a collapse in public debates. It appears as budget negotiations, temporary funding bills, theater around debt ceilings. The underlying issue remains the same. The system relies on the ability to issue more obligations than the productive base can realistically support in the long term. That is the beginning of every monetary drama in history. At low levels, debt can act like a tool. It can build infrastructure, fund innovation, bridge temporary gaps. At extreme levels, it becomes a trap. The United States now carries a debt load so large that normal growth no longer stabilizes it. In order to keep the ratio from exploding, the economy would have to grow at a pace that is incompatible with aging demographics, political fragmentation, and resource constraints. The curve has taken on the distinctive shape that appears in the final chapters of every monetary story. Slow, manageable increases at first, then a smooth slope, then a steeper line, then an almost vertical rise as each crisis is met with more borrowing instead of structural repair. Once that curve goes vertical, history shows one endpoint. The currency that measures it stops meaning what people think it means. For decades, the answer to every shock has been the same. Cut rates, expand the balance sheet, create new facilities, inject more liquidity, promise that this is temporary. In practice, temporary measures become permanent infrastructure. Emergency programs are reactivated for the next emergency. The balance sheet expands into regions that would have been unthinkable in previous generations. This is not an accident. It is the logical consequence of a system that cannot politically accept contraction. When growth falters, the pressure on policymakers is immediate. The incentive to manufacture liquidity and push problems into the future is overwhelming. That is exactly how Rome diluted its silver coinage. That is how Spain leaned on treasure fleets instead of reform. That is how Weimar discovered the speed of the printing press. Technology changes the mechanics. It never changes the temptation. Gold does not file lawsuits or hold press conferences. It simply reprices. When the weight of paper promises becomes too heavy, gold steps out of the background and demands more of that paper in exchange for the same ounce of metal. This is not enthusiasm for gold. It is rejection of everything else. Central banks understand this language. Recent years have seen the fastest accumulation of gold by official institutions in modern records. Nations that depend on the dollar system publicly pledge loyalty to it while quietly diversifying away from it. Nations that challenge American power accelerate their gold programs and encourage their own citizens to buy metal. This is not a trend one sees at the beginning of a healthy monetary order. It is what insiders do when they accept that the current architecture is living on borrowed time. The dollar's role as global reserve currency looks like an advantage. It allows the United States to borrow more cheaply, to run deficits longer, to import goods in exchange for claims on future dollars instead of immediate settlement. Underneath, it creates a vulnerability. If the world begins to doubt that the United States can or will honor those claims in real terms, the very privilege of issuing the reserve currency becomes the accelerant of distrust. History shows this clearly. The British pound enjoyed reserve status before the dollar. During its decline, the illusion of safety lasted right up until it did not. The shift away from a dominant currency is never polite or coordinated. It happens through a series of small decisions taken everywhere at once. Slight reductions in holdings. Slight increases in gold allocations. Slight changes in trade invoicing. Each move is small. The combined effect is massive. Governments everywhere have committed to payouts and protections that far exceed realistic long-term funding capacity. In the American case, pension obligations, healthcare commitments, defense budgets, and social safety nets all lean on future productivity that may never materialize in the volumes required. These commitments are politically untouchable. No administration can openly admit that the promises cannot be kept. The usual answer is accounting creativity and more debt. The result is a widening gap between what citizens believe they are owed and what the system can actually deliver without dismantling itself. That gap is not a statistic. It is a time bomb. Every year that passes without adjustment increases the scale of the eventual break. Monetary distortion always shows up in the middle of the social structure. Wages rise slower than living costs. Assets owned by the already wealthy inflate. Home ownership becomes harder for new generations. Savings held in cash lose purchasing power quietly, year after year. The people who work, save, and follow the rules discover that the rules change faster than their ability to adapt. This erosion does not announce itself as collapse. It appears as fatigue, as quiet anger, as declining trust. It appears as families that feel poorer despite official statistics claiming progress. It appears as political fragmentation and radicalization. These are not separate issues. They are symptoms of a monetary regime that transfers wealth from savers to debtors and from the many to the few. Every collapsing monetary system has a long period where nothing dramatic seems to happen. Shops stay open. Governments function. Markets fluctuate within a familiar range. People notice higher prices and larger numbers, but they adapt. They assume that someone, somewhere, understands the full picture and has a plan. The danger lies in this adaptation. Trust persists far longer than prudence would justify. The Romang merchant, who accepted lower purity coins, still believed in Rome. The Spanish noble who watched prices rise still believed in Spanish power. The Lebanese professional who left savings in the local bank still believed those deposits would be accessible. Normalcy is the camouflage that hides. Terminal stress until the final phase. Past collapses unfolded at the speed of horses and ships. Information moved slowly. Reactions took time. The modern system operates on digital rails. A change in confidence can move through the banking network in hours. A run on a regional bank can spread to a continent overnight. Capital can shift across borders in seconds. This speed does not prevent collapse. It compresses it. The long, grinding declines of past empires can condense into shorter, sharper breaks. That compression is already visible in recent regional banking scares, in the volatility of sovereign debt markets, and in the way liquidity vanishes when traders suddenly step back. In a structure this interconnected, one serious loss of confidence does not stay local. Every modern financial system is built with emergency powers embedded in the fine print. There are provisions that allow banks to limit withdrawals, governments to freeze accounts, regulators to impose capital controls, and central banks to override normal rules under extraordinary circumstances. These tools are rarely discussed in public. They exist for crisis, not for calm. The Lebanese episode exposed what those powers mean in practice. Doors simply stayed closed. Transfers were blocked. Citizens discovered that their digital numbers did not equate to real access. Western systems hold similar mechanisms expressed in different legal language. The presence of these escape hatches is not proof that they will be used soon. It is proof that, when strain reaches a threshold, the system will protect itself first. As trust in money erodes, wealth migrates into things that cannot be printed. Property, commodities, productive businesses, and above all, monetary metals. The sample script you provided shows that pattern clearly. Gold is not portrayed as an investment play. It is portrayed as the control group in a failed experiment. In the American context, this migration has already started. Hand real estate, farmland, rare assets, and bullion have drawn flows from those who can read balance sheets and history at the same time. This process is still in its early phases for the general population. For institutions and insiders, it is already a working strategy. The current global system of unbacked currencies is young. The break from gold in the early 1970s marked the start of an era where money became an idea enforced by decree rather than a claim on a scarce asset. That experiment delivered growth, financialization, and a complex web of derivative structures. It also delivered the deepest debt buildup on record and the widest disconnect between financial assets and the real economy. No fiat experiment in history has lasted forever. Some have endured for decades. None have survived the combination of runaway debt, demographic stagnation, and geopolitical stress without some form of default, reset, or inflationary wipeout. The present system is not exempt from that record. It is part of it. Official statements present control and calm. Central banks speak about tools and confidence. Governments speak about plans and resilience. At the same time, those same institutions adjust their balance sheets in ways that contradict their language. When a central bank claims the system is sound while quietly buying hundreds of tons of gold, the real message is in the action, not the words. This gap between narrative and behavior is one of the clearest late-stage markers of a strained system. Ordinary citizens listen to the language. Insiders act on the data. Eventually, the inconsistency widens enough that even non-experts notice. That moment is usually the beginning of the end for public trust. Monetary systems are built on belief. Paper only functions as money because people accept it as such. Once the belief that a currency will hold purchasing power begins to break, the process accelerates. Prices jump not only because of new money, but because sellers no longer want to sit on the old money. Wages chase prices. Contracts fail. Saving in the currency feels pointless. So, people either spend immediately or flee into alternatives. The United States has not reached that visible tipping point yet. Daily life still runs. The dollar still dominates trade. Yet the preconditions are forming. The combination of high debt, constant monetary interventions, and rising gold prices signals early belief erosion among those who watch closely. When that erosion reaches the broader public, the adjustment moves rapidly. Individual signals can be dismissed. One can look at gold's move and claim speculation. One can look at debt and argue that modern economies can carry more. One can look at central bank behavior and see diversification rather than fear. What becomes harder to dismiss is the alignment of all these factors at the same time. History's major collapses appear when multiple cycles peak together. Geopolitical tension, internal division, monetary distortion, demographic pressure, and technological disruption converge. The current American system sits at the intersection of all of these. The gold price is not causing that convergence. It is reflecting it. Put these 15 signals together, and the picture becomes clear. The United States is not on the verge of a Hollywood-style disaster where everything explodes overnight for dramatic effect. It is moving through the late stages of a monetary regime that has exhausted its tools. The collapse, if and when it crystallizes, will feel slow for years and then suddenly definitive. Banks that seem stable will use their emergency levers. Benefits that feel guaranteed will be renegotiated by inflation instead of honest admission. Debts that look abstract on charts will be settled through reduced purchasing power rather than open default. The gold price above $4,000 per ounce is the simplest, bluntest summary of that trajectory. It compresses all the complexity into a single, relentless number. Every tick higher records one more quiet decision by a saver, an institution, a central bank, or an algorithm to trust metal over promises. The public story will focus on speculation, trading, and cycles. The deeper story is about confidence leaving the current order. An American economic collapse. In this frame is not a single date or news headline. It is the cumulative effect of these signals finally overwhelming the system's ability to pretend they do not exist. It is the moment when belief in the old rules gives way to recognition that those rules have already changed. For anyone watching the signals, that recognition arrives early. For everyone else, it arrives all at once. The history of Rome, Spain, Weimar Germany, and Lebanon shows the same structure. Long denial, growing distortion, short, violent resolution. Gold did not cause those collapses. It simply marked the phases with ruthless honesty. In the current cycle, it performs the same role. It stands outside the American story and records in real time, the distance between public narratives and hard arithmetic. That is what this moment represents. Not a random spike, not an anomaly. A clear, sustained warning that the trajectory of the USAS monetary system is converging on the same destination as every empire that believed it could override the limits of debt and dilution. The signal is not subtle. It is only ignored by those who still believe exceptions exist where history has never granted them.